Thanks for coming. I know I've met some of you, probably briefly, but my name's Heather Owen. I'm the guidance counselor here for those of you that I have not met. So again, thanks for coming. We're really excited about getting some of this college and career type stuff kicked off for parents. And so from what I'm hearing, this is kind of the stuff that you guys are asking for. So any and all feedback from this would be great so that we can keep positive stuff like this going. I would like to introduce Cozy Wittman. She's with College Inside Track, and they were gracious enough to reach out to us and come and speak about how to afford college. All right.
Very good. Thank you, Heather. Thank you for having us. Thank you for carving out some time on your Monday during a holiday week, which I'm sure is busy for you. My name is Cozy Wittman. I'm with College Inside Track. We've been helping families navigate college search for about 15 years. I joined the team about 2.5 years ago, primarily because they did amazing work for my family. And so for the purposes of tonight's conversation, it might be more helpful for you guys to know I have 5 kids. We have done every college search at my house, from a D1 volleyball search to mom musical theater or pre-med. That kid actually graduated as a finance major this last spring. And so one of the things that became very clear to me very quickly as we launched kind of our first official college search was that I didn't really understand what was happening. People around me were sending their kids off to schools that I perceived to be very expensive. People were talking about college tours. I never did that. And so I was fortunate enough to bump into College Inside Track in this exact same format. And so took copious notes and then ultimately hired them for my children. But the goal for tonight is to really help you guys understand how college search has changed. I always mention my husband is a car tinkerer guy. He is building a Land Cruiser from the bottom up. And he can do under the hood stuff, right? He loves to do that. When we first met, he could do a lot of the fixes that my car required. He can no longer do that, right? When I say there's something wrong with my car, he hands me the number for our mechanic and says, call them, right? Because it's hard. It's squished, it's covered, and also he doesn't have the diagnostic equipment anymore, right? Because all your cars are really rolling computers. And so just like your car search has changed, college search has also changed. So what I want to start out with tonight is a little state of the state of what college looks like. And then per our title of our presentation, I want to dive into 7 insider baseball tips, strategies for you to do a little bit more strategic college search and also to save you some money along the way. So we're going to start here. I can either confirm or deny that this might be my college dorm room back in the day. I grew up in Iowa. My parents said to me, Cozy, Iowa or Iowa State? Which one? I chose correctly. I became a Cyclone, primarily because we had season football tickets. And that seemed like good enough reason to me. I would propose to you that is a terrible reason to choose a university today. But back in the day, we didn't know any better, right? Things looked differently. And so Iowa State was close. I hand-filled in my application and off I went. When I sit down and I chat college with families, which I do often, in my 2.5 years I have chatted college with well over 500 families. One of the things that strikes me very quickly in the conversation is that this is what families are thinking about when you start chatting college. And I'm going to put all things cool and fun under the category of emoji with heart-shaped eyeballs, right? So we're thinking about the friends we made in college and the professors that got us connected to our next opportunity, all-night study sessions with your pals and Saturday afternoon football games, and all the things that make college a super cool, fun experience for kids. The flip side of that is that colleges are a business. This is an industry. And the business that is college has a CFO, a Chief Financial Officer. And that Chief Financial Officer translates the budgets they have created for the admissions group into butts in chairs in the fall. And those admissions groups are incentivized to get their numbers. with bonuses, right? And so it's important for you to understand that these are not benevolent creatures getting ready to educate your children for the good of society, right? Yeah. These are businesses. And the sooner we can align a business thought process with that emoji with the heart-shaped eyeballs, the lower our overall debt and the more predictable the cost of college will become. So just like your phones don't behave like they did back in 1987, like this picture was taken, when this picture was taken, just like your cars don't behave like they did back in 1987, college search has also changed in the last 30 years. Today, great college search incorporates three things: the right academic fit for the student, the right social fit, and, per my tip, the right financial fit for your family. And here's what you find. If you pull all three of those things together, you'll notice this is an equilateral triangle. So it's important that every college on the list align with your student academically, also be the right kind of learning environment and personal environment that they are looking for, because you recall you actually live at school when you go off to college. It's also important that it fit your family's budget. And when I sit down and chat with college with families, one of the things that I find is when I get to the part where I ask, what's the strategy for paying for school? I get a lot of this. What a good question. And then like, I don't know, you tell her. No, you tell her. No, you tell her, right? And eventually it boils down to, well, we're gonna see where our student gets in, and then we'll hope for the best. We'll figure it out then. How many of you bought your house that way? Right? You told your real estate agent, just show me a bunch of cool houses. Here's roughly what we want: bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, this part of town. But just show me a bunch of houses, and then once we fall in love with one, when we show up at the signing, you can just let us know how much it is. Right? Just like you did not do that for your house, I know, I would propose to you at the cost of college today that you not do this for your college purchase either. And so we're going to step through some ways to start to think about this tonight. So let's start with a quiz. Let's see how smart the group is tonight. As a percentage, how much has tuition gone up at the University of Minnesota since 1987? I'm going to give you some options: 107%, 230%, 350%, 570%, or maybe you're wishing you would have drug along your T1 to get this bad boy done. Let's see hands at 107. Anyone there? No. Whoa, it's a room full of cynics tonight. Okay. How about 230? Anybody there? 1, 2, 3. Okay. 350? All right, good chunk, maybe 10. 570? About the same amount of people. Drum roll, please. University of Minnesota has gone up 570%.
I was there.
Were you really? What'd you pay? Do you remember?
It was about $800 a quarter or so.
Yes, that seems about right.
Yep.
About $1,600 a year.
Without housing.
Yeah, just tuition. Yeah, that's a tuition percentage increase, by the way, because you can't find cost of attendance numbers. Anybody a Badger? Anybody go to University of Wisconsin? University of Wisconsin's gone up 1,047% in that same time frame. University of Michigan, 1,053%. University of Iowa, 460%. The national average for public universities sits at about 213%. The Big Ten sitting well above average. Those big state flagship universities sit well over the national averages. And classically, in Minnesota, we are classically above average at almost 600%.
How do they do it? Why is that?
Why is it going
Why
up?
that industry?
What a great question. They get away with it because they can, right? University of Minnesota today has 3 times the number of applicants that they would ever need to fill a freshman class. And as long as, and this is not a political statement, it is fact, as long as we allow a student loan program that does not cap your students out, as long as we allow a student loan program that continues to allow students to take on as much debt as they need to get out of school, it will continue to do that. Because it's no skin off the university's noses, right? If you bury yourself in debt, right? They can do it because they can, primarily. Now it'll be interesting, right? There's an interesting trend that's starting to formulate in the last few years. Fewer kids are going off to college than the year before. And that's been happening now for a few years. But here's the deal. The University of Minnesota's of the planet, right? The Penn State's of the planet, Notre Dame's of the planet. Those schools are not ever going to have that issue, right? There was an interesting study that came out that predicts that in 10 years, about a quarter of the universities that are operating today will be closed. A quarter, 25%. That's good news for the big dog universities, right? Because kids got to go somewhere. It's basic supply and demand. We have to kind of change the way we think about college for it to force the issue and force numbers down again. Private colleges, by the way, in that same time frame, have only gone up 415%. There's a little state of the state. I bring these colleges to your attention because the top 4 almost always get bubbled up as a school of interest by your students. When I ask them what schools they're interested in, these are now cost of attendance, so all in. Tuition, room and board, books and fees, okay? Some local favorites in the middle there in the private space, but the number I want to draw your attention to, and this is actually low, University of Minnesota just did a 3% tuition increase, so that number is a little higher. It is just over $29,000 a year now to attend the University of Minnesota, your state flagship public university. How many of you worked your way through college or paid a big chunk of your own education? How many of you could have done it, do you think, at $29,000 a year? It is not your imagination. It is harder to pay for school today. It does make college, by the way, the second largest investment that your family is going to make next to your home. But most people still doing search with their heartstrings instead of facts. And that's what I hope to kind of evolve tonight as we go. Feel free, that's just my coat there on the end. You can feel free to sit in the chair. It is also very, very challenging for students to work their way through college. So incorporate that into your strategy as you're thinking about how are we going to pay for school. Keep that in mind. So when it comes to college, sadly, there's a little bit of the blind leading the blind. So who do you guys ask when you have a question about something related to your kids, right? But somebody else who has a kid. You ask another parent. And sadly, there is so much myth and misconception in the college space that all that happens is people just keep perpetuating the myths. In the folders that you guys got, there's a really good article on the myths of college. If you can't sleep later tonight, feel free to pull it out. Or maybe on your drive to Grandma's house for Thanksgiving. But take a look at that, because there are a lot of myths in this space, right? A lot of things people believe to be true that the colleges do not go out of their way to debunk because it benefits them. There is no purchase as large as a college education that people know so little bit about, but they think that they do, right? So I want to debunk some of the myths tonight as we go through. Consequently, what we see are people kind of lining up, jumping off, and hoping for the best. And I will go back to my philosophy, hope is not a great strategy. Today, the average family takes on about $58,000 of student debt per child in your family. The average student debt today is around $37,000. So guess what, parents? That additional $20,000 is coming from you, right? Parents are taking out an additional $20,000 in their own names for their kids' college education. And here's the other thing. Does anyone know the maximum amount you can get through the federal student loan program for 4 years? Anyone know? Are you adding it?
Yeah, 23,000?
Close, really close, 27,000.
7.
So if the average student debt is 37,000, guess what that means? Not only are parents taking out $20,000 in their own names per child in their family, they are also co-signing on $10,000 additional dollars per student in their family. This is unsustainable. I'm with you. Why does this happen? It's crazy. But what I want to do tonight is make you guys the smartest people you know in college search. That's my goal. Share some of this with people you know. So before we dive in, I want to pause quick and see what questions you have. Now, y'all look so cheery when we started. You should see your faces. All right, so let's talk about how you combat this, how to think about this differently. Oh,
Question.
sorry, yeah.
So we went to a college fair thing a few weeks ago with their son, and the thing that hit me was them saying how the parents are gonna, their financials and everything are what's taken into account. Okay, prior to that, this is our first child is coming up to college years now or whatever. Prior to that, I had the understanding everybody was saying, don't help your child. That's the last thing you want to do. Your kid can take out a loan and he can, they can take care of it. Now we hear, oh no, you're going to be doing this.
Yeah.
So what am I not understanding with that?
Good. Can I go back to this slide? There's a lot of myth perpetuation, right? So the FAFSA form, which we'll talk about here in a sec, you are 100% correct. Takes into account your income and assets. This is also something different from 30 years ago, right? So it used to be your parents could just say, on your own, you're off our taxes, I'm not claiming you anymore, you're independent. And then you as a student could file your own, right? Not true anymore. In the undergrad space, as long as your student is under 24 years old, it is your income and assets that are playing. We're going to talk about this more in a second. It is very challenging today. As a freshman, the maximum amount of student loan you can get is, you were adding, tell me how much. Do you know?
Through the federal loans?
Yes, through federal loans.
5,500?
$5,500. The federal student loan cap for freshmen is $5,500. That is the only loan that your student can own on their own. Any other loan you're going to need for freshman year, guess what? Requires your co-signature. Right? Do you see how challenging this becomes? If your strategy is, college is you, I did mine, this is yours, right? And I theoretically, I don't disagree with that strategy. I'm a feet firmly on the ground kind of mom, just ask my kids. And you need to own your own responsibility. But it has become next to impossible to actually execute on that strategy today because of the stature of the loan system in place for kids to pay for school. Now, I hope to teach you some ways around some of that so that you can reduce the cost of college. That's the whole second half of tonight. Was that helpful?
You didn't give me any money, so.
I was waiting
You
for
explained-
the
you explained it well.
No, you did not make that better. All right, so there are two forms of money available to students who are going off to college as freshmen. One bucket of money is based on, guesses?
Academic.
Academics, right? That's called merit aid. The other one is based on? Need. Right. Need-based aid, merit-based aid. These are separate buckets of money in college land. So some families are going to get to draw out of both buckets. But every single family in this room, if you know how the colleges play this game, can take advantage of merit aid. And we're going to spend the entire back half of the presentation talking about merit aid, but let's start with need-based aid. So there are two forms that you fill out to determine if you have need. One is called the FAFSA, very good. Anyone know the second form? for kicks and grins, the CSS profile. The FAFSA and the CSS profile kick out a number called the expected family contribution, or your EFC. This is not what college will cost you. It is also not your expected family contribution. It is merely, hang one second, it is merely part of a formula that determines if you have need. Yes, ma'am.
Why? Why do they give you that number then? Why do they call it expected family contribution if it's not?
Because it used to be. It is no longer used that way. So that's something that's evolved over time. So the expected family contribution today is used to determine if you have need. It is merely part of a formula. And the way it works is this: sticker price of the college minus your expected family contribution. If there is gap, you have need. If there is not gap, you do not have need. You don't get any need-based money at those colleges. If you do have need, if there is a number at the end of this scenario, the college will cover some aspect of it. There are next to 0 colleges, though, that cover 100% of need, which is why the EFC is no longer your EFC. It is not what the colleges are asking you to contribute. It will likely be more than that, or the cost of the college, one of the two. I know, it's ridiculous, right? It is also, by the way, the expected family contribution today is about 47% of your net income. Now, I don't know about you guys. When I sent my oldest off to college, everybody else left behind expected to do this amazing thing called eating. Right? Half of my income could not be going off to college with her. That was not a thing at our house, or anybody's house, I don't think. It has no real basis in reality, which is also why it is harder to pay for school. That number used to be 18%. It is now 47%. So there were tons of families who were need-based back in the day, right, and got need-based money. There was also more federal need-based money available. It just isn't there anymore. So it's not your imagination, it is harder to pay for school. So what factors into this formula? We kind of touched on this through your question. Your income and assets as a parent, the number of kids that you have in college, and their income and assets, which brings me to my first tip for you. If you have the potential to be need-based at some schools, it's important that money not sit in your children's names. The FAFSA formula assesses children's assets at 20%, where your assets are actually only assessed at 5.64%. So your money goes 4 times further if it sits in your name as opposed to your children's names. 529 plans, by the way, are a parent asset, even though your kids are the beneficiaries. So that's good news. It's only assessed at that 5.64% rate. However, if you would happen to have UGMAs or UPMA accounts that the money is sitting in, those are actually assessed at the student's rate. And so assessed at that much higher level. Yes?
What was that rate again for students?
20%. Questions about this?
So retirement assets are not counted
Correct.
unless you draw on them and count that as income.
And make it income, that's correct. Yeah, so that actually brings me to my next slide. Thank you for the segue. 42% of families make an error on the FAFSA that ends up costing them money. That is one of the biggest ones, right? So here are the things that do not go on the FAFSA. The FAFSA asks a really generalized question like list your assets, so people do. Your retirement accounts are not an asset that is expected to be tapped, so your retirement assets do not go on the FAFSA. So if your money is sitting in a retirement account, it does not belong in the FAFSA until you're correct, you start to draw, and then it's income.
Healthcare savings plans, et cetera, et cetera.
Deferred accounts actually do go back on the FAFSA. They are added back to your adjusted gross to increase that number. Same is true for the retirement deferred during that year that the tax year is that they are looking at. Yes?
I guess it's similar to that, so if you have something that's not a 401k, but it's an IRA, it's some other,
Yep.
whatever, that's considered retirement? Or-
Correct.
Okay.
As long as it's a qualified retirement account, it is. Now, if it's an educational IRA, which is different, that actually does go on as your asset, as a parent. The other thing that people often put down as an asset is your home. That does not belong on the FAFSA. Okay? The value of your home does not.
Cabins?
Cabins do, I was just gonna say, cabins and investment property do. If you are one of the families that needs to fill out a CSS profile because the college asked for it, you don't have to fill this form out unless the college asks for it. But if they do ask for it, it's kind of a no holds barred kind of form. They want to know everything. They want the value of your retirement accounts, your home, they want everything. It is a long form. It is a painful form to fill out. Some schools use their own financial profiles. Any other questions related to this? Now you have like your super studious faces on, you should see. I always wish I could take a camera and like scan the audience. So we aren't going to spend any more time here. Here's why. I hope the one thing you walk away from tonight with is this. If your family will not be need-based, right? If your family makes too much money to find yourself in the need-based space, stop worrying about it, right? Stop being angry about it. Stop trying to wiggle your way into the need space, right? Because you can't. Your assets were assessed at what rate?
20.
Right? Yeah, thank you. 5.64. Your income assessed at 47%. So unless you plan to quit your job and become a pauper for the purposes of college, you can't do it. So don't go home and call your financial advisor tomorrow and say, I want to sell all my assets. I want to get rid of. I want to spend these down. Change your strategy. Change your strategy. I can't say it enough. If you're not going to be need-based, change your strategy. Stop worrying about this and stop thinking about how you can maximize merit aid, which is what we're going to dive into. Before we get into the merit space, though, I just want to double check that we don't have any questions about the FAFSA or about need-based money. Yes?
Just a quick question. Once a child has started college, if the income goes up or down, assets go up or down, once that child has entered college, can the amount of aid vary year to year for them?
Yes,
Okay.
it can. Need is assessed every single year, so you're going to fill out, the first FAFSA you ever fill out will be in fall of your student's senior year. It's not February anymore, it's fall. And then every single year until the last one you fill out, which will be fall of junior year of college. And so if you have fluctuation in your income, it will catch up with you eventually. Any other questions?
Myth or truth, the amount of income that they deem as need is a very small, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where
Yes,
a
I know
teacher
what
would
you're
say, I'm a teacher, I hardly make anything.
Yeah.
And colleges would come back and say, no, you make a lot.
Yeah. Good question. He basically is asking what income deems you not need-based anymore. The number is actually quite high, but it is dependent on the school, right? And in some ways, that's asking the wrong question. The real question is, can you afford your expected family contribution, right? Because here's the way that I'm a very hand talker, so I have to use hands for this. Here's the way the need works. Sticker price minus expected family contribution equals gap, right? So let's say you're looking at a school that's classically, let's take top of the list, NYU 75,000, right? And I'm going to use round numbers for cozy and doing math in front of a large group of people. And let's say your expected family contribution is $50,000, right? So 75 minus 50 leaves you a $25,000 gap. You're need-based at this school. That $50,000 expected family contribution means you have a family salary of roughly somewhere around 110, 115, because it's using adjusted gross, okay? So some aspect of that $25,000 is going to be covered with grant or scholarship money. Most schools cover somewhere in the 50 to 60% range, right? So let's take half. Let's call $10,000. They hand your student $10,000 in a presidential scholarship, right? Then you have $15,000 left of need that the school is not going to cover. And so what they do is take that remaining 15 and they add it to your expected family contribution of $50,000. So now the $75,000 school is going to cost you $65,000. So the question is, can you afford your expected family contribution? Not, am I going to be need-based or not need-based? Does that make sense? And then for schools that do merit aid, and we'll talk about how this works here now, some schools are going to knock that number down more based on merit, right? And that's where the big leaps come. Need is almost never where the big leaps come for average families, if you take kind of middle income families. Yeah.
Does your expected family contribution, that's gonna be the same no matter what school you go to?
Correct.
So it's really the starting cost of the college that's gonna give you your gap?
Need. That's right. You are 100% correct. And you can do that simple math by yourself. And if you want to know what your expected family contribution is going to be, use the FAFSA forecaster. It is FAFSA, F-A-F-S-A, and the number 4. If you Google that, it'll pop right up. And you can go out and do an estimator. Way better than the net price calculators on the college websites. Way more accurate. Then do your own math. Sticker price minus my expected family contribution. Do your own math. The other thing I will tell you is that expected family contribution, here's a little multiple choice. The FAFSA belongs to A, the family, or B, the student?
Student.
Not both. Yeah. It is the student's FAFSA. It is not your FAFSA. It's you fill out your profile, right, to get your PIN, right? But it is the student's number. So when it kicks out an expected family contribution, that's for this student. So if you have twins, you fill out the FAFSA twice because it's not your family's FAFSA. It belongs to this student. Then you fill it out again and it belongs to this student. And if your expected family contribution is $50,000, it is $50,000 for this student and $50,000 for this student, or your family's expected family contribution is actually $100,000. Does that make sense? Because the student owns the FAFSA, not the parents. It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. Am I clear? Maybe I should ask that. All right, so, see, I can see all these wheels turning, right? I see them all, like, how can we be need-based? Stop thinking that way. I would like to take a big eraser, what's that thing that you shake and you clear out all the... Etch-a-sketch, thank you. I would like to do that with all of you. Like, let's get rid of your thoughts and philosophies around being need-based. Stop thinking that way. Let's talk about merit, because this is way more fun. Merit aid is based on all things amazing and wonderful about your kids. It has nothing to do with income and assets. Your family can make $10 million a year and still get merit aid. Merit aid is all the things that your kids do every day anyway just to keep themselves busy, right? The more rigorous coursework, the clubs, activities, volunteering, sports, work, all of those things pull together to create students that colleges are interested in. And once colleges as a business are interested in your student, because your student helps them as a business, there is money on the table for you now. This is a business decision for colleges, right? They don't have any people running around in those business offices with little heart-shaped eyeballs. They have little dollar signs. All right, so let's talk about merit aid. To get the most merit aid possible, you should be exploring colleges and not private scholarships. This is the other kind of biggest myth sitting out there. Here's why. Colleges account for about 35% of the total grant and scholarship money available to students who are going off to college. Take a look at the private scholarship space. It is 7%. You know what the average award amount is in that space? $1,900. Now, if someone walked up to me and handed me $1,900, I would not be disappointed, right? But here's the deal. If your kid is going off to a school that costs $26,000 a year, that $1,900, congratulations, you bought books, right? It just isn't that much money. Also, the private scholarship space, one-shot deals. You apply, you write your essay, and then if you win that money, it lasts for 1 year, and you are done. It goes away. And your student has to hop back on the scholarship train again and go find more money. And guess what happens when your kids get off to college? They stop looking, right? Because they got busy. Here's the deal. Colleges, on the other hand, tens of thousands of dollars available through those colleges and their endowments, and their money lasts for 4 years by and large. The vast majority of the money you will get from them will last for 4 years. So if you're going to invest time and energy doing research, spend your time and energy researching colleges. So, a couple mistakes that we see that people make in the merit space, and these are biggies. One is me, but not this first one. Every spring I get this phone call. It is a dad, and he is sad, he's crying, or it's a mom and she's angry. They have the 4.7 GPA kid, 36 on the ACT, started a business in my bedroom kid, right? Sharpie. We are getting lots of money, full ride somewhere. They apply to 5 schools that you can imagine, right? Expecting to get that full ride because I'm sharp. And then they get their financial packages back and, right? And someone said, you should call College Inside Track. And they call us because they can't afford a single school on the list, right? Because they looked at a bunch of schools that don't offer merit aid. Remember my big list of colleges at the beginning there? Those top 5 schools down to Carleton, including Carleton, do not offer merit money, period. There's no money there, right? No money at NYU, no money at Columbia. Not for sharps, right? Not for Sharpie kids. Doesn't matter how smart you are at Northwestern. It does not matter how many businesses you started in your bedroom at University of Chicago. There is no money at those schools. Not all schools give merit aid. It's philosophical. The second mistake that we see that people make was me. I told my kids, you can go anywhere you want as long as it's in the state of Minnesota in a state school. Right? What was my mistake? I cast way too narrow a net. I was automatically excluding the best merit givers in the country because of my rule system. Fortunately for me, we bumped into College Inside Track, so my kids had a shot. So let me teach you some of what I learned. What should you be looking for? You should look for schools that offer merit aid. How do you know? You have to ask. They do not put this on their website. Why? Because here's why. Imagine if on the home page at Northwestern it says, no merit scholarships available. Imagine how many applicants they would get then, right? Those schools thrive on their low acceptance numbers, right? The lower that acceptance number is, the more selective we are and the more elite we are as a university. They love that. They are not advertising this in any way, shape, or form in most cases. So you gotta ask. Also, where your student is kind of interested, right? So again, think about this as a business decision the schools are making. The schools are investing in their own business, right? And it happens to benefit you, is the way to think about this. So, you mentioned that it's academic aid. It's a little bit of a misnomer because in some cases it's not based on academics, but in some cases it is, right? So looking for schools where your student's GPA or ACT score brings them in above the incoming average for this college. And that stuff they do have on their website, right? So if your student's GPA or ACT score, SAT score, is a little bit above the school's average or in that top 25% of the incoming freshman class, there's money for them. Why? Because your student's helping them draw up their averages. That's what they like. That's what they're paying for. Or your student has something interesting that they do, right? Classically sports, but not always. We had a student who had been dancing hip hop her whole life, competitive hip hop, right? She'd been dancing since she was a small fry. And she was this kid, like, I'm going off to college, leaving dance behind, I want to try new things, right? And one school offered her $12,000 a year to dance hip hop for their team, because they had a competitive team. Guess what? She's dancing. Yeah. Friends of ours, their student plays ultimate frisbee. I don't even know what that is, but Luther gave him $8,000 a year to play ultimate frisbee. Right? So think creatively. The demographic mix on campuses matters, right? They care about the mix of men and women on their campuses. And if you doubt this, go to any college's homepage when you get home, pull that homepage up, doesn't matter which college it is, and here's a beautiful display under the fall leaves of men and women, right? Lots of nations represented. They care about this. My daughter is a dance major. This filters down into the majors. She's a dance major. She's at a state university in Missouri at their conservatory. There are 140 kids in the conservatory. 6 are men. Guess how many are on a full ride at this public university?
6.
That's right. I'm just saying if you have boys. Anybody have the tuba player? Anybody? No? That's too bad. There's money for tuba. The U even pays for the tuba. No money for flutes. Right? Interesting is what they pay for. All right.
Do you have to be good at it? Does he have to be good at it?
No. I was just going to say, I cut my joke off kind of midstream. You also don't have to be a good dancer. Jillian would tell you they really aren't very good dancers. They all just can lift. When I saw them, they were good dancers. Here's a tip that lots of people push back on, right? You should look out of state. I know what you're thinking, Cozy, what about that out-of-state tuition stuff? Yep, true. If you want to go to the University of Michigan or Michigan State, are you going to pay $65,000 for that experience? 100% you are. 100%. But if you're open to looking at the smaller state schools in the state of Michigan, and these aren't small schools, they're 25,000 students. They just aren't the 2 big dogs. A bunch of those schools got rid of their non-resident tuition. Why? Because they had declining enrollment. And those schools looked around and went, shoot, what are we going to do about this? And so that's what they did. One of my kids could have gone to one of those schools if she had wanted to for $12,000 a year. All in, cost of attendance. Right? Think more broadly. Private schools don't do in-state, out-of-state. That's not a thing. They start at a sticker price and then they slash based on some of the stuff that we're talking about, if they're a merit school. Why does this matter to colleges? Here's why. Go back to our picture, right? It is fall, leaves are changing, beautiful spray of men and women. Very close to that picture is a statement that says we've got one student from all 50 states and 37 countries around the world. Their demographic mix matters to them. Why? Here's why. 50% of kids go within 100 miles of their home to college. And I always joke 49% of the other 50 go within 103 miles. I sit down and chat college with families all the time, and I always ask the student, how far from home do you think you're comfortable? You know what they tell me every time? Far. They want to go far. They look kind of sideways at their parents, right? They don't go far. Minnesotans really don't go far. Our number's like 73%. 73% stay in the state or touch a border. We really don't go far. So all your kids have to do is step over Wisconsin into Michigan, and you're interesting. I met a student down in Kansas. She came up here and toured Bethel. And she looked at me and she said, but I'm not going there. And I said, oh, how come, hun? And she said, because everybody I met there was from St. Paul. I'll never fit in. Oh, that's what makes you interesting, right? Most colleges have the bulk of their applicants from the local community. So you are interesting just because you're not from here, right? Super important in this next bullet, however. We had a student a couple years ago, 2.8 GPA, 24 on his ACT. Super nice kid, wrote a really nice essay, got a full ride at a small private college in upstate New York. Why? We don't know. We have no idea. We suspect they needed some Minnesotans. But if you took that same college, picked it up and dropped it into Chicago, guess what? That 2.8 kid getting money anymore?
No.
Is he getting a full ride? Nah. Right? That school happened to be in Buffalo. Buffalo has to compete with all its buddies, right? In NYC and all the other big dog schools around. So supply and demand plays a part of this. Everybody wants to go to Chicago. Everybody wants to go to New York. If you are interested in Ithaca, New York, that's a whole other ballgame. Location can save you up to $15,000 a year, times 4. This is real cash. Couple points on the ACT or SAT can literally be worth thousands. This goes back to my point about coming in the upper 25%, right? So there's no magic number you should be shooting for, but looking for schools where your students' numbers come in above those colleges' averages, right? So that's what you're looking for. Do invest in some test prep. It is worth it. Imagine if your student goes from a 24 where there is 0 merit aid available to them to a 26 where there is now $1,000 a year. If you invest $800, $900, even $1,000 into test prep, right? And you get $4,000 back for that, I will do that all day long. We don't do test prep. I don't have a horse in this race. I just know that if you're going to play the college lane game, you've got to play it the way that they do. Here's the deal. What if you have a bad test taker, right? They just aren't a good test taker and they get severe test anxiety. I had a family call me, 4.2 GPA. Their student had taken the ACT 6 times and her top score was 21. Broke my heart. And they were calling to ask if they should do it again. I was like, no, please stop torturing your kid with the ACT. There are schools, more than 1,000 today. When I started with College Inside Track, this number was 800. 200 schools in 2.5 years have added their names to the list of schools that do not require any kind of testing for acceptance. You can find the comprehensive list at fairtest.org. And these are not less than schools, right? Sometimes kids would say, well, I don't want to go to those schools. Really? Because University of Chicago is on that list, one of the most selective elite schools in the country. So is Denver, a school that every kid on the planet tells me they want to check out. Any questions about this?
Schools have gotten rid of class rank. Because it doesn't matter to colleges, have you found that out too?
Yeah, they're relying more on kind of their GPAs, right? Because here's the challenge. the class rankings, there's a whole kind of sub-discussion around the artificial elevation of GPA, right? Because you can take all these AP courseworks and they're rated, and it's on a 5-point scale, and now half the classes are graduating with a 4.0. So it's becoming irrelevant, basically, to success. And so they really are looking more comprehensively at students. Not to go wrong, so they're using kind of straight GPA to understand that, right? It is not easier to get into the University of Chicago because they dropped the ACT testing, right? Or they dropped class ranked as part of their criteria. But they use kind of a minimum number to say, okay, everybody under this number is off the table. We're not even gonna look at them, right? Which is why the kids who have like a 3.7, hear me loudly, there is nothing wrong with a 3.7 GPA. There's nothing wrong with a 3.2 GPA, right? It's just the way that college land works today. The University of Minnesota, if you don't have a 3.7, it is a stretch school for you. And it's simply because of the sheer volume of applicants they get, right? And so they kind of scooch all these people who don't even hit the minimum standard off the table. So now we can start comprehensively looking at the list we have left, is basically what they use. All right, so here's a little fun thing to run through. This is how one school pulls together their merit package, and here's what I want to share with you about this. These are really common categories in the space of the private schools. Public schools are very cut and dry. GPA, ACT, and then sports and maybe a tuba player, right? It's very straightforward. It's not that they don't give merit aid, it just isn't very much, and it's based on relatively few things. Private colleges are challenging because it's hard to know what they're giving money for this year, but these categories are very common in this space. So as we go through this, I want to share this with you because this is the great unknown, right? This is the stuff I learned as part of this process. And so don't pay so much attention to the award amounts as the categories. At this school, demonstrated interest is worth $3,000. What is demonstrated interest? What does that mean? What does a student have to do, do you suppose, to demonstrate interest? Graduating is a good start. What?
Would it be their essay?
Yes, but it comes before that, right? That's part of the application process. It comes
Filling out
before that.
a recruitment form or interest form online?
What did you say?
Filling out like an interest form online?
Yes, both of those, right? Touring schools, just contacting the school and say, hey, send me some information. Are you going to be spammed to death? 100% you are. But for $3,000 a year, you spam me all day long. I don't care, right? That's what my Yahoo account is for. We were just talking about that beforehand, right? Schools give more money to kids they perceive are interested in them. Again, as a business decision, I've got one student I've talked to multiple times. I've toured my school. They stopped by my table at College Land, right, at the college fair. They came to our alumni event, all those things. Or I have a kid who just sent in their application. They aren't even in my database. Who am I giving more cash to, right? It's a business decision, easy. Live out of state at this school between $2,000 and $15,000. So the rarer students get more money. For every A, $62. Rigorous classes are worth $400. An excellent letter of recommendation at this school is worth $1,800. For every point above this school's ACT score that your student's score is, $425 per point. Okay? Just for filling out your FAFSA. This school is giving you $1,800. How come? Why are they paying you to fill out a FAFSA?
Data.
Yeah, that's right, said the marketing guy. The short answer is data. That's right, because here's the deal. On day 3, if your student goes to this school, guess what happens? You get a phone call, and it's Susie. And she's pretty sure she knows your student. She also happens to be a journalism major. And Mrs. Wittman, would you be interested in contributing to our endowment? And I said, Susie, I did. I made my tuition payment. Right? They're looking for information. At this school, they require a CSS, and if you go to the trouble to fill that bad boy out, another $2,500. So even if you perceive that you are not going to get need-based aid, you should be filling out your forms. There's no way for you guys to know who does this and who doesn't. There's no way for us to know, right? We've been doing this a long time. This is not information that colleges share. You will not get a list of all the boxes your student checked for the college, right? And at this school, a great essay is worth between $1,000 and $8,500, which is why we use essay coaches with our kids. It is hard for high schoolers to write an interesting, memorable narrative about themselves. It's hard. Questions about this? Colleges would add these numbers up, hand them to you in the Andy Smith grant, or the Bulldog Scholarship, or my favorite, the Presidential Scholarship. Times 4. My sixth tip, you can negotiate your award in college land. It is called an appeal. So do not call the colleges and tell them you're ready to negotiate, right? Because they don't like that. This is not used car sales. In college land, you need a reason. And the reason might be maybe your income has changed since the income year that they are considering. Maybe you got a big bonus that year. More fun, you got a better deal somewhere else, right? So we did this with one of my students. Elise applied to 5 schools. She got into all 5. Top of the list was Coe College down in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and Drake University down in Des Moines. Elise did a lot of things right. She spent a lot of time and energy interacting with both of those schools. So by the end of the day, Drake went from $48,000 down to $26,000. That's a pretty good offer, I thought. Coe, on the other hand, went from $42,000 down to $9,000 cost of attendance, all in. 9. I had on Coe's t-shirt, I'm singing the Coe fight song, like we are going to Coe, I'm whispering in her ear at night. Nope. She really, from the time her pinky toe hit Drake University, she wanted to go to Drake, right? So we took Coe's package back to Drake, said, look, she really wants to go here, but look what Coe did. And they're like, all right, fine. Here's another $8,000, does that make you people happy? Yes, yes it does. It makes me happy, right? So just because we were willing to reach out and say, we need something different here, we garnered an additional $32,000. I did not even know that was a thing before college in Central.
So Drake sometimes says, yeah, Cole, did you apply to Luther? Where's Luther on? Because sometimes they'll see that as the competitor.
Yep.
Is that true?
Yep. Yeah, you can't do this with everybody. I made it sound super simple, but you can't. You need the right schools on the list. For instance, if your kid is applying to St. Thomas, you should automatically be applying to St. John's. Right? Those 2 schools compete with each other for the same students. And none of them, to be clear, none of them care about what public schools offered your kid. Right? None of them. And public schools don't do this, so you would never be appealing a public school. It's not a thing. No one at the University of Minnesota is looking at your appeal. You can try, but it's a waste of energy. Literally, you can save thousands here. Right? Cast a wide net and then bring it in. Do not make these decisions while you're creating a college list. Make these decisions at the end when you're looking at numbers. Don't be me. And my last tip for you, start early. I used to ask what age your kids were. I don't want to know. I don't want to know how many of you have seniors, because that always makes me sad. Start early. I don't care where you are in process. Time is the enemy of a great college search. How many of you go to work, go home at the end of work, sit down in a chair, stare at the ceiling, and say, man, I wish I had something to do tonight? Right? Me either. And your kids certainly don't, right? It takes time to do a great college search today. Give yourself ramp to get it done, right? Because it's hard to carve time out of your life to do this artificial going and touring thing, right? It also takes time not just to research the schools, but to take and retake an ACT. All of this takes time. It has to be planfully laid out today. You can't wing it. So give yourselves the luxury. I don't care where you are, just get going, okay? A couple things about us. We do help families navigate college search from the very beginnings, creating that list all the way to the end and the acceptance, and we actually stay with our kids through graduation. We do save families money on average. We save our families about $75,000 off the four-year cost of college, off the sticker price. This is my favorite thing that we do. 4 of my 5 kids are girls. They have all mastered the eyeball roll, right? And they love me to death, but I am never the smartest person in the room, right? Now that they're older though, my kids are starting to become actual adults. I'm getting smarter, I've noticed, right? We get to be a third party. We get to say things to your kids just because we're not you. I know you know this stuff, some of it at least. They just don't believe you do. All right. So here's the coolest thing I want to offer to do. I've mentioned a couple times that I sit down and chat college with families. Bar none, my favorite thing to do. And I would love to do that with your family too. So we give a free hour of consulting to any family who wants it. The goal of the hour is to walk you through those 3 goal areas: academic, social, and financial fit. These are great strategies, but they don't work for every single kid. And so instead, I want to learn about your goals as a family, and then we're going to talk about some strategies that actually align with what your goals are, so that you have some stepping stones that you can start to launch your own college search with. I can do a rough EFC to give you kind of back of the napkin math so that you understand, or maybe you'll surprise me and when we sit down, you've already been out to the FAFSA forecaster, and I can say, hey, do you know your EFC by chance? And you can say, yes, I do. That's perfect. But I'm going to talk to your student too. This is a great way to grease the skids of college talk, right? To start to talk about this stuff with your kids. And so please take advantage of this. Let's do some housekeeping things and then I'll take questions. If you have a student who is pretty young yet, maybe you have a 9th grader, for instance. Now, some 9th graders are totally ready to have this conversation, and if that's your student, awesome, I would love to sit down. But if you're thinking to yourself, my kid would never talk college right now, they have no idea. That's okay, 9th grade is pretty young. They're just figuring out high school, right? So on your form, there's a place for that. Just check the appropriate form and tell me when you want me to reach out, and I'm happy to do it. If you don't tell me, we'll reach out during sophomore year. Take advantage of a consultation. In your folder, there is a form. If you want to pull it out, if you want a copy of this presentation, just check the box that says, send me a copy of the presentation. If you want to take advantage of that consultation, check the box, right? And I'll give you a call and we'll set this up. And I come to you, by the way, we don't have offices. So we can meet at your house or a local coffee shop, whatever you want to do is fine. We also put out a monthly newsletter. It follows the path of college search. College Inside Track, even though we work with families all over the place, we are small, nobody's spamming you. So if you want that newsletter, just check the box that says, send me the newsletter, and we're happy to send it. It has great pieces of information in it. For instance, the National Association of College Admissions just changed the rules on reaching out to kids after decisions get made. So we had a great article on what that means for your family, potentially. Today, there's a lot of stuff about applications, of course, and about the FAFSA. And so after the December newsletter, we'll have stuff about like what to do once you have been accepted, what's your next step, that kind of stuff. So it just follows the path of college search. If you want to get on that, let me know. Check the box. And then lastly, I hope that you learned at least one thing that you did not know before you walked in the door tonight. If that's true, this is super fun for me. I love to do this. I'm passionate about college search because frankly, if I meet one more family getting ready to send their kid off to the University of Iowa to the tune of $42,000 a year, to be a teacher and the game plan is loans, I'm gonna cry. It just doesn't need to look like that. I wasn't kidding when I say you guys are the smartest people you know in college search. If you routinely get together with parents in some format, scouts, sports, maybe a church youth group, or maybe you just have people over on Sunday afternoon for football, I would love to bring this presentation to them, bring them together. If you want to explore that because you felt like this was valuable, just check the box. I'll give you a call, we'll talk about what it looks like. You can decide if you want to do it. But don't keep all this good information to yourself, that's what I'll say. Questions for me? Yeah.
So you're talking about, starting early. So what if you get the student that's just like, I don't have any idea what I want to do. How can I look for college? I don't know what I'm going to be when I grow up.
Yes, I love this question. Love it. Really good impersonation. Here's the deal. Totally fine. How many of you knew what you wanted to do when you were a junior in high school? Good for you. That's about the percentage, right? 1 in, what do we have, 30 maybe. And then most of those kids change their region. Here's the deal, you don't have to know. The best way to kick off college search is actually the vibe piece, because that's easier, right? You don't have to think about, what do I want to be when I grow up? You just have to think about what kind of environment do I want to hang out in 4 years. And so we actually recommend that you start to tour locally, because it's cheap, right? And do some extremes. So take a tour of the U, take a tour of St. Kate's, or take a tour of Concordia, or take a tour of Augsburg, right? So you've got the super big sprawling and the tiny in the city. And just start to get a sense of where did you feel more comfortable, right? The rest of it can come later. There are schools actually that do undeclared. They prefer it. And so I just tell kids, like, don't sweat the small stuff. Choosing a major is small. Right? Finding a school that aligns with you academically, that has some areas of interest, and by academics I mean rigor, right? So if you're the 3.7 kid, do you want to be in the environment where the average GPA is 4? Maybe you do, that's okay. But there's a different feel to that kind of campus than where the average incoming GPA is 3.65, for instance, and you're just a little bit older. Every kid is different. They want to be in different environments. Start to explore that. That's an easy way to kick it.
There's such a vast array of colleges, as you're saying. Don't look here, look beyond.
Yep.
How do we even start looking?
Sign up for the college consultation. Seriously, think about some of the questions that I go through with the kids are, how far from home do you think you're comfortable? And you can quantify that into drivable or flyable, right? And don't be the parents that autopilot discount the flyable piece, because guess what? All you're doing is encouraging your kid to assure they want to be on one of the coasts, right? So just explore that, because here's what ends up happening. Remember my little stat. 50% of kids go within 100 miles of their house, right? So just explore it with them, right? If you hopped on a flight, here's what it would mean, right? I told my daughter, if you go to New York, that's fine with me. But you can't come home at Thanksgiving. And you can't come home whenever you feel like it. Maybe Christmas and then the end of the year. And that's it, right? So think about what that means for you. You'd be surprised how quickly many kids like, oh, nope, I'm gonna be driving home. I'm okay with that, right? Think about the logistics of that stuff. So that's where I start with. And then size, right? Are there parts of the country that are more interesting than not? Do you want 4 seasons or not, right? There's some easy ways to start to quantify this, and that's some of what we'll talk through with your student there at the family consultation. Yeah?
Does not declaring a major or interest have an effect on scholarships at all? Certain merit base that they might
Yeah, it depends on the school,
Okay.
is what I would say. But here's the deal. If your student is truly undeclared, meaning they just really, truly don't know, finding schools that do that better then don't base a lot of their merit packages where they require kids to come in undeclared, right? So then it's just about finding the schools that do that, right? Those are different searches than the kid who knows they want to go into engineering, they just don't know what kind of engineering, you know? Other questions? Those are awesome questions. Yes,
I heard there was reciprocity with Canada.
correct. Just Manitoba though.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want to go to Winnipeg, so if you really like winter, you can head up there. And we do still, there's a lot of like, we don't know if we have reciprocity. We do still have reciprocity with Wisconsin and North and South Dakota. Iowa plays nice with no one. They are not part of that, or any agreement, by the way. What?
They're so elite.
Right. I grew up in Iowa and I'm like, don't you as a state want more people? I don't think you would want that.
Not to pump up Iowa State, but are they giving out more financial aid than a lot of other?
Yes. So I can say that I feel good about my alma mater. They bugged me to death when my kids were searching. And I was like, yeah, as soon as you guys sign that reciprocity agreement, feel free to reach out. Until then, goodbye. But they do, so Iowa State tries to do some additional merit aid. It's based purely on academics for students from Minnesota. So if you fall into that pool, it brings their pricing down to $32,000 instead of $38, $39, $40. It's still not in-state pricing here, but it's getting closer if your kid's considering University of Minnesota, right? Because the pricing is very similar. Iowa, no, zero, nothing. You pay full freight.
So what's the timeline like for getting pricing back from the universities based on like what year you're in and when you make your application and when you get those numbers back to make decisions?
Good question. So you apply to schools in fall of senior year. You get your numbers back sometime between December and March of senior year. And not till then. They won't guarantee you anything before that.
Kind of tacking onto that, there's only so much money available from the college, so the sooner you do it, the better
Correct.
odds are.
That's why for your favorite schools, for our students, early action deadlines for the favorite schools are what we shoot for, which are November 1st, November 15th usually, classically, some December 1st. Yeah, because merit need both, or first come, first serve. I had a family call me in March. Their student was a 4.4 GPA. She got 36 on her ACT. She applied to the University of Minnesota in March. They got their package back in March. You're in, full freight. Not a penny of merit aid, right? And not that the U is a big giver, they are not. But usually with those stats, you would get some cash. She got nothing, right? So we started working with them during her gap year because her mom is like, and it just makes me sad when kids had those kind of stats to go off to schools like the University of Minnesota. And I'm not dissing the U. I had 2 kids who went there, but you don't get cash for your good graces there, right? That's not a thing. And so it kind of makes me sad when people waste. You are strictly, in my opinion, and it's classically my opinion, not the opinion of college, etc. That you're kind of wasting your stats at a school like the U, right? Because they aren't giving you money for it, really. At the University of Minnesota, if you're the 4-point kid with the 34 on the ACT, you are rocking and rolling there if they give you $2,000 or $3,000 for that. That's it, right? Where there are other schools, they'll give you tons of cash. So cast a wide net and then bring it in later. Anything else? Those are all great questions. All right, you were awesome. You stuck around for a little bit and then some. Fill out your forms, leave them on your chairs. I'll collect them when you're done. And I'll stick around if you have questions. Thanks, you guys.